Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Welcome to MSD Warren Township and Liberty Park Elementary, or as affectionately we like to call ourselves, the pride of the East Side. I'm Dr. Tim Hansen, proud superintendent of Warren Township, and we are excited to be a part of Governor Holcomb's agenda announcement today. I would like to recognize Principal Jason Brooks, who's the principal here at Liberty Park. Thank you for hosting us today. I also want to thank our board president, Ms. Williams, and our board for their support today. I'm excited, and it's my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch, who will lead our festivities this morning.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to Lincoln Park Elementary, Liberty Park Elementary School, and thank you, Dr. Hansen, for hosting us. And it's great to be here. And as you all know, as Lieutenant Governor, I serve. One of my duties is constitutionally, I'm president of the Senate. So next Monday, we'll be going into session. And when we go into session every year, we ask ourselves, what is it that we can do that will make life better for Hoosier families and businesses? And we know that the next chapter in Indiana's history will be about quality of life. And why is that important? It's how we attract talent and how we grow our population. It used to be that people followed businesses, but today businesses are following people. And people are choosing to live where they enjoy that quality of life. And the governor is going to be touching upon those agenda items that really elevate the quality of life in Indiana. And I'd like to just touch briefly upon four that I either chair as initiatives or through my agencies. First is the Next Level InVets initiative, where we look at attracting men and women who are transitioning out of the military to Indiana, match them up with employers, and then integrate them into our communities. And to date, that initiative has had an $18 million impact on our economy. The Indiana Destination Development Corporation, chaired by Elaine Beadle, it was created by the General Assembly to be able to attract talent, to be able to welcome visitors, and to be able to keep our young people here in Indiana. And we are very humble Hoosiers, right? We work hard, we put our nose to the grindstone, and we don't pat ourselves on the back for doing that. But as a result, we don't always do a good job about telling the story of Indiana, and we have a great story to tell. And so the funding in this budget to be able to allow Indiana to compete with other states is extremely important when we look at growing our population and attracting talent. With inflation, with the war going on, with gas prices and food prices going up, it's important that Hoosiers that suffer from food insecurity, and that's 1 out of 7 Hoosiers, have the resources and have the food to be able to enjoy their quality of life. And so that funding for food banks that is in the budget is extremely important. And then broadband, being able to connect people is really that first step towards increasing our quality of life. And so taking the 70 million that we still have and being able to add that to the 268 million that has already been expended and awarded, connecting almost 75,000 Hoosiers will continue to elevate our quality of life, particularly in rural Indiana. And then the last initiative that I am very, very excited and proud of is the funding for mental health and the focus put on mental health. As you all know, the human cost of this pandemic is huge, and it's going to continue to grow for years to come. And it affects our budgets, it affects our workforce, it affects our families. 1 out of 5 Hoosiers struggles with mental illness or addiction. And we all know Hoosiers that have faced those challenges, sometimes our own family members. And my family's no exception. My mother suffered from depression. My sister Nancy died by suicide. And we buried my brother Larry this November. He was an alcoholic. That emphasis and that support for mental health is extremely critical for the quality of life that we all want to enjoy. And so those are just a few of the things that are in this incredible budget that has been put forth by the governor, and in my opinion, the greatest governor in the United States. Please help me welcome Governor Eric Holcomb.
Yep. All right. We got a lot to go over. You all have been sitting there like you've been in timeout. It is a very comprehensive budget. I first want to, before I get into the details, thank the superintendent and the principal and all of you. Much of the cabinet is here present with us. Thank you, Suzanne, as always. Good afternoon to everyone that's joining us, whether you're at work or at home, streaming, live, playing through with us. Everything this administration does, and you'll see on the slides as we go through it, is kind of geared toward one focus or one vision or one executing a mission. It's really putting into action what our agenda is all about. And that one thing is making sure that we're providing more pathways for an individual, for the individual Hoosier, for a business, for a community to take it to their next level. That's obviously all centered on our budget. That reflects our state's priorities each and every 2 years when we come together, sometimes in those odd years as well, allocating dollars toward what we think is, when time is of the essence, what is important to address. And so we have a long-term vision, obviously, in the state of Indiana, but we're making tactical, strategic moves every year along the way. So that budget that we put together is going to reflect not just our priorities, but it's going to also center on kind of 4 key pillars, those being economic development, those being educational and workforce development, public health and wellness development, and then of course community development, which the Lieutenant Governor just touched on a number of those items, all built on this foundation of good government service, being responsive, adapting, being nimble in the case of Indiana to the needs of the day, come what may. And we've seen a lot of come what may over the course of the last few years. It's interesting when I came in and I see all over the school core, this could almost represent our administration's approach as well, being civility and order and respect and always striving for excellence. So it just kind of hand in glove, that foundation that we're all centered on is important to each and every one of the almost 28,000 state employees that are working for every single citizen and taxpayer in our state. So I'm going to jump right at it and get right to our budget and the priorities of our budget. This will be our 10th as a state, our 10th straight, honestly balanced budget. It will, again, as I said, fund our key administration's priorities. When you stop and think about where we were in terms of revenue some years ago, whether it be 2005 or 2017, and where we are today, we've grown significantly year after year after year. The budget that we will put together won't only fund these priorities, but it will also leave a healthy reserve. Both in the next 2 years, we'll be leaving as a reserve as it is right now, north of 14%. So we still will have north of $300+ million, understanding that the legislature has their own priorities too, that we're working on with them. So not everything that I'll kind of touch on, this kind of thumbnail sketch of our agenda, is included in what we'll learn about tomorrow when we submit our actual budget at 10 a.m. And then obviously I'll provide some more details, maybe a few surprises at the State of the State address on next Tuesday at 7 p.m. if you're at home. And so again, this is built on this, what we've become known for, certainty and predictability, continuity, and that's kind of Indiana's advantage and Indiana's edge. And people can predict that this is a good place to invest. In addition, we've got a couple other items that we're going to be addressing as we have in the recent years, that being making sure that we continue to pay down our obligation to the pre-96 fund. We'll put another $1 billion toward closing that gap. It used to be, Senator Camley, this was 2060 when we had plans to kind of get in line with this. And now we brought that up about 30, 31 years to its 2029 after this latest installment. So a significant amount of progress has been made. We're also not losing track of some of the projects we have underway currently, mega projects, major projects, like the archives building, like the co-location of the new deaf and blind schools, like Westville Prison, high ticket items that we want to make sure we continue to make progress on. So we're setting aside in fiscal year 2023, so soon, $1.25 billion to make sure those projects all over the state remain in motion. Once we get past laying out the complete budget, then we get to how do we keep this economic engine humming or growing. Obviously the pie is growing, that's by design, not luck. And the way that we're going to continue to kind of keep our foot on the gas is making sure we're doing even more than we are today and making things permanent, modernizing all the tools that the Indiana Economic Development Corporation needs to go out and win the type of business that we want to associate ourselves with. So we'll be seeking to establish a $300 million a year deal closing fund. We'll be seeking to establish a $300 million a year tax credit fund or tax credit cap, providing that flexibility for the IEDC to go out there and get the deals that we want. We'll be looking at a $150 million revolving fund for site acquisition. We've made some historic announcements recently. We want to do more of those, obviously. And then we'll formalize through language. This is a good problem to have, but if we go through that funding, we want to go back to the legislature and seek additional appropriations to make sure we keep the momentum going. We're competing against states that are equally nimble, and it's coming down to kind of the same 6 or 7 usual suspects that are elbowing one another out there on the court to get the businesses that we want, these high wage, high demand jobs. And to have this tool in our toolbox will, I think, could be the X factor, quite frankly. And then we'll continue to, as we have been at the IEDC, at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, continue to fund entrepreneurship and innovation and marketing to, again, their audience, the business leaders in the state of Indiana, around the country, domestically and internationally. And when you look at the percentage of business deals that we're doing here at home and abroad, it is significant. And we think there's a lot more room in the coming next 2 years in that window to nail down a lot of businesses, but we have to have the resources to do that. And then I don't want to lost another wildly popular program, being the #1 manufacturing state in the country per capita. We want to double the funding for our manufacturing modernization grants that are out there right now to the tune of $40 million over the biennium. This is one of those tools that helps those small and medium-sized businesses remain nimble and adapt to the changing times and keep their workforces and their payrolls intact and modernize along the way. For our economy, see the workforce cabinet, DWD, for our economy to continue to grow, obviously their fuel is that workforce that I just mentioned. For us to reach that full potential, we've got to make sure that Hoosiers are skilled up and ready for the jobs that we're bringing to the state of Indiana, especially when it comes to those jobs that you've seen recently that we're attracting, those high wage, high demand jobs. And so we'll focus on a number of workforce development initiatives along the way, from regarding every single person, no matter how young you are to however old you are. Whatever your profile is, we're going to be focused on you from a very early age, from early childhood to K through 12, through post-secondary, higher education, and then into those adult learning programs that sometimes they're the X factor themselves in terms of getting someone off the sidelines and back into the workforce. Or if you're underemployed, how do you move up that ladder in the workforce? And so just very quickly, I'll dive into the early childhood portion of the four. We'll seek to establish a $25 million innovation grant with federal funds on this front that will help us provide, again, funding and support for employers. Think about on-site child care programs, Chamber of Commerce-led programs. We know we need more of it closer to get folks back into the sidelines. And we want to make sure those are quality and the capacity is there, but also the quality is there and close. We'll work to reduce responsibly the regulatory burdens that are preventing workforce from entering into that profession. There's some things that we can do. So we're going to take a real hard look at how do we attract more into that profession. Could be younger, could be on-site training, you name it. There's a number of ideas that we have that we want to put into motion to attract more professionals into that occupation. We'll look to expand access to the child care and development fund, and also on the On My Way pre-K program by raising the eligibility criteria to allow. We identified another 5,000 Hoosier families that would be able to qualify for that program. Currently, there are about 44,000 in the CCDF, and there are another about 6,000 in the On My Way pre-K. And so we think there could be another potentially, as I said, 5,000 more join that 50,000 just by having those options available to Hoosiers. Then we move on up to K through 12. We will be promoting what we've identified as the single biggest dollar amount increase in K through 12, 6% in the first year and 2% in the second year. That equates to right at $1.157 billion in an increase over the biennium. Significant to say the least. We'll also be looking to something that I've wanted to get at for some time now, and now is the time, carpe diem, I guess you could say, and that is eliminating the textbook fees for Hoosier families. I think this is, to do this will be meeting the spirit of the law, quite frankly. We're only one of 7 states, think of those as competitors, that don't currently mandate this. And those are our competitors. Just make no mistake about it. Texas, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, these are folks who take pride in actually paying for those textbooks and that curriculum. And we can join that. We have the financial wherewithal to do this. And I'll just quote the law. Article 8, Section 1 says, there is a duty to provide by law for a general and uniform system of common schools wherein tuition shall be without charge and equally open to all. And I don't think it could be any clearer than that. And so the next question is, do we have the ability to do it? Obviously, in the budget that we'll submit tomorrow, you'll see we do have the financial wherewithal to get that done. It's about $160 million a year. It's important to keep this into context. We currently have, if you're eligible, about $39 million that we pay for already. And so we're wanting to expand that to all. And if you think about, if you're eligible, someone else is paying that for you. So it's almost double taxation for some groups. So this would be paying for the textbook fees and the curriculum for all traditional public and charter schools, as well as students who qualify for free and reduced lunch at non-public schools as well. We also are going to continue, this is just, Superintendent, again, thank you, to the perfect location, the perfect backdrop as we continue to kind of lean into some of our, shall I say, literacy deficiencies or the work that we have yet to do. We're at about exactly 81.6% right now at the 3rd grade proficiency level. We want to increase that to 95% by 2027. And to do that, we've got to continue to not just probably double down, but triple down on this front, making sure those kids are reading at that level in the third grade. And so we'll continue to focus on the science of reading, making sure that the Indiana classrooms like here in your corporation, but here at Liberty Park, are taking advantage of the partnerships that, because of the Lilly Endowment, quite frankly, a massive investment on this front. And then we'll go back to the legislature and ask for another 10 million to get another match for the Lilly Endowment, and keep pushing on this at the very earliest of ages. And we'll look for some other creative ways to create a new incentive program to reward schools and teachers who are improving, who are moving that iRead3 needle. And then one that is occurring right now, kind of almost in a hodgepodge manner around the state, certainly around the country, we'll seek to launch the Dolly Parton Imagination Library statewide, much more methodically, to provide books to children at home. It has their name on it, they get mailed to their home, just to encourage parents to be reading to kids. I mean, I often talk to teachers who say if a parent would just simply read to their newborn through, age 5 for 20 minutes a day, what a difference it would make once they get to school. And so we want to do things that can encourage that type of action. And then we'll have the DOE continue to take a deep dive, ensuring that high quality STEM, the STEM curriculum is available in schools. And so they'll evaluate and they'll publish and approve the STEM quality curriculums that so many of our schools are offering and are so critical in different pockets of our state to get folks on the right pathway to have their ticket to success in their hand when they leave high school, if they choose to go right into a career, if they choose to go on to higher education. And then I want to restore our JAG funding. This is going from about 6.8 million a year to 8 million. It took a hit during the pandemic years, but this is for schools who want to. They're not mandated, but schools that want to offer JAG, the program, to get students associated with and connected to potential careers once they get out of high school, if they're not planning on going into higher education. And then we get into adult learning, kind of the fourth layer of our workforce development programs, and post-secondary, even before that. When you think about the needs that are out there today, it's not just the need for more GEDs or more certificates or more credentials. We need more degrees. We need more masters. We need more PhDs. It's not either or, it's all the above. And so we'll be seeking from the legislature to increase higher education, their budgets by 6% also in the first year and 2% also in the second year. This is $184 million, $3 billion over the biennium. And then we'll be looking to the commissioner at CHE, at the Commission for Higher Education, already has some ideas out there. We'll be looking to support them, but performance funding focused on keeping the students that are coming to our state here in our state through the formula, and using it to make sure that our campuses are truly these pockets of brain gain, not brain drain. We're really good on attracting students from all over the world to come here. We want to make sure that they're discovering their next adventure right here in Indiana and not somewhere else. We'll seek to follow up on our recommendation to automatically enroll all eligible students in the 21st Century Scholarship program. And then we'll also seek to do something different here in the state of Indiana. It's a kind of a personal source of pride that we have Martin right in our backyard, Martin University in our backyard. This is Indiana's only predominantly Black institution. We'll be seeking about a $10 million infusion into Martin to where they can help deliver on building direct pipelines with with a population that is not just vulnerable, but highly in need of having that ticket to their success. And so when you talk about, we do a lot of P3s in the state of Indiana very successfully. This is a P3 that's a little bit out of the box, and one that I think can change the trajectory of not just, again, a community, but our state. And we can be a real leader on this front for so many first generation college and low income minority students. And we can kind of show the way, and very pleased to be working with Kara and with Dr. Huddleston on this front to kind of do something new and show that it actually can be done. And then we get to, as I alluded to, the final phase, the adult learning side of this, and to where DWD really becomes kind of central to someone's maybe last chance or a different chance to do something. And we'll be looking to build on what's working on this front, addressing issues where there are wait times through various programs. The DWD often serves as its front door to both the employee or the potential employee and the employer. And so where we have a need, like with Excel Centers, with the partnership with Goodwill across the state, where there's more of a need, where we already have an Excel Center, we want to do more. And so we'll be expanding them. And where there's not one, maybe in Evansville or a different city that wants one, we'll be looking to help fund that. We'll be looking to increase funding for the Online Graduation Alliance, so adults can earn their diploma and their credentials online. It's been effective. We can do more on this front. We'll be looking to increase, in general, the adult education programs. And that's because we know there are lines, there are wait times for folks who are wanting to get into programs. We'll look to increase funding for the Workforce Ready Grant, maintain funding for the Employer Training Grant, pilot a program to incentivize unemployment insurance recipients to obtain their high school degree or diploma. We'll look to fund, again, some of those Governor's Workforce Cabinet recommendations, making sure we get those underway. And then, as Lieutenant Governor Crouch mentioned, our Invest program, where we looking to boost their funding as well. Just like Uncle Sam, we want these veterans from all over the country. Matter of fact, we need these veterans from all over the country to come to the state of Indiana, because we do have opportunity for them to take part in. And then we'll move to one that's not been easy, but one that is central to it all. Health is wealth, and it has to be discussed in the same context. I mentioned the need for more, credentials and certificates and degrees and diplomas. We also need to get healthier as a state. There's just no two ways about it. I won't go through all the rankings today. I'll save that for another day. We could. You've seen those before, I imagine. But suffice it to say that we're going to have to do something different if we want a different outcome. I'm not a believer that these outcomes are inevitable or they need to be, but it will require everyone, including us, this administration, to do some things differently. We have the financial wherewithal to hit this head on. And we've had the Public Health Commission, again, former Senator Luke Kenley with us, Dr. Judy Monroe, Dr. Box, of course, Paul Halverson, Bob Courtney. We've had a mix of county and city do a year-long deep dive and really look at a public health system that's been in place for over a century and approach it like, if we were to build it today, what would we do if we wanted a different outcome? And discovered, obviously, that yes, resources are needed. Yes, more partnership is needed. Yes, sharing of expertise and data is needed, all the above. And I'll cut to the chase. It's going to take dollars to affect that positive change or impact or effect. We think it'll take at least 120 million in the first year and about 227 million in the second year as we build the structure, the new structure, and put it into place and get it underway. It's important to note, as shown on the slide up here, that the first year, 100 million of that 120 goes to the locals, goes to on the street, goes to that side of the partnership. And 200 million in that second year, the 227, is going to the locals. So we're building it from the ground up where the action is occurring in the districts. And we think that this is going to be a way in the planning, in the building of the structure, in the participation, locals having skin in the game too. This is 80-20. This is working in a number of areas across our administration, that we can in fact start improving on our health outcomes. And then something I'm equally passionate about, Dr. Box certainly, Dr. Rosiniak, everyone that's come together in terms of building out our My Healthy Baby program. We're at 82 counties right now. We got 10 to go. Can't get there soon enough, but it will happen in 2023. And then, as the Lieutenant Governor also mentioned, a couple areas here that you alluded to that we can't retreat on either fronts. One being mental health. We'll look to continue to expand 988. We know that folks need not just a place to call or a place to go, but someone to actually be working with them, the right person actually to be working with them. We had since July, about 15,000 plus, so it's gone up since the last couple of weeks into 988. So we know there's a need there. We're going to have to put some dollars behind beefing that up. We're going to look to expand our local crisis stabilization units. We'll be looking to continue transitioning to the certified community behavioral health clinics in the counties, so folks know there's a place close to get the actual kind of care that they need. And then we'll continue to look at ways and support more funding for our local partners to not just address, but to ultimately reduce veteran suicides. We know that veteran suicides are about twice the rate of the population as a whole, and grants that are given to organizations that are, again, in the community have proven to be successful, and we want to be a leader on that front here in Indiana. The other kind of side of the coin to mental health and depression is something that's closely tied to it is drug addiction. And again, I won't go through all the rankings, but again, we're a target-rich environment for improvement, to say the least. So in 2023, we'll look at launching a new treatment finder program to help people get quicker care, closer care when folks are in their most frantic position in life. We've just seen too much harm, or worse than that, ruin to individuals and families, to not continuing to lean into this and continuing to build out that regional system, very localized, of recovery hubs so that they're getting that care. And of course, like locals, the state will be looking to invest the national opioid settlement dollars to create more community programs like we're seeing crop up, very successful programs in communities like Kokomo, those substance use programs and evidence-based programs in our jails all across the state of Indiana. So again, leaning heavily into mental health and drug addiction programs. And then the last pillar, if you will, of the four is what Lieutenant Governor Crouch mentioned about quality of place and quality of life, and how they're hand in glove, how they go together, how they attract exactly the kind of investments that we want and build the kind of thriving communities that we want. This is by design, and it's very strategic as well. So we'll be seeking another $500 million to the READI program, READI 2.0. This was wildly successful, is wildly successful. That's about $500 million in READI 1.0 that's leveraged $10 billion over the course of a few years. We think another few years of that type of investment will be critical to the state of Indiana as we see the years unfold. We'll be looking to live up to the charge of being the most trail-friendly state in the country, and looking to put another $50 million into our trail program. So we have at least another 2 rounds over the next 2 years to connect communities. We'll be looking to do another $25 million into our land conservation efforts, partnering with folks like the Nature Conservancy and others. We know this is one of those kind of, again, Indiana's great outdoors. Every thriving region and community has a thriving outdoor amenity menu. And this is one of those ways that we just see the ROI of public and private partnerships coming together to really elevate not just goals, but the work that actually gets done. Then, as mentioned as well, covered a lot, more broadband internet connections. We still have some remaining funding in what the legislature appropriated before, so we'll have another round this year, and then we'll prepare. It's important that we have a very successful program in place, because we're preparing for another, every state will get about 100 million exact, dollars for broadband internet connections later this year, and then more potentially after that, grants that we'll be applying for. We'll be looking to, as airlines come back online and to decide their routes, to secure more regional, more domestic and international direct nonstop flights, key to a state like Indiana that fancies ourselves as being the crossroads of America, but also to be the cross airways of America. We'll be looking to support Gary, Indiana, but Gary Airport's cargo development projects. And then we'll be looking to double the state funding for food banks to supplement the local needs there. We know they've increased over the last few years, and we want to make sure that we're helping as a partner, a good partner, to meet those needs. And then I should say, finally, for any thriving, prosperous community, they need to be safe. And so we'll be committing major funding on a number of safety fronts. Number one, we'll be looking to increase the school safety fund from the current $19 million a year to $25 million a year. We know the need is there. We'll be looking to increase Indiana State starting pay from the current $53,690 to a minimum of $70,000 starting. We'll be looking to, so good to see the professional and volunteer firefighters sitting by one another, but we'll be looking to implement regional firefighter training assistance, getting to that, developing the hub and spoke approach and infrastructure that's in place right now, but enhancing that. We've got about 14 training sites around the state of Indiana. We think there's a need for another 16, and working closely with our firefighting friends and investing in mobile equipment to address some of those gaps as well, and then providing critical and crucial PPE for our volunteer firefighters as well. And then we'll be looking to also, it'll be reflected in our budget, what we support, but the funding for our courts. Talk about order, law and order. It has a start and has hopefully a finish that is fair. And so we'll be looking to support the Chief Justice's request to make sure that they too are able to upgrade in terms of data and technology advancements that have occurred and affected the courts all across the state of Indiana, and expand their key problem-solving courts that are so successful across the state. I will say, just to recap, that's a lot. I don't know how long I went on and on and on, but there's a lot more that'll be reflected in the budget tomorrow, but it all rests on that good government foundation that I mentioned at the very outset, making sure not just the cabinet reflected here, but thousands of other people that wake up every single day, public servants, completely devoted to providing efficient and effective government to every citizen in the state of Indiana. So we want to make sure they have the resources and ability to provide exactly that kind of service. So we're addressing in an unprecedented way some big and bold, strategic, use whatever word you want to use, but areas that are going to take our state truly to I believe, the next level in terms of public safety, in terms of public health, in terms of public education, in terms of community development, in terms of infrastructure connections and strengthening our local partnerships and the bonds because of the programs and work that we're doing together, assisting so many folks who are maybe on the sidelines today to get into the workforce, and not just in, but then up, grabbing the next rung up, and we're there to help kind of reach them as they reach out to us. And then enabling, of course, through all this, more dollars into regions, into districts, onto the street where the need is actually being met. And that all in turn helps this economic pie. When you go from back in 2017, a revenue of about 15 billion to what we project out of about 22 billion, this is because the pie is growing and it's working. And then this is the time of the year where we get together on Monday and we start to really in earnest discuss what these priorities are. I'll say this one last thing, it won't be the most important thing that I say this year, but we do have something else on our agenda, and I'll just get it out of the way. We're going to settle the question once and for all about what is the official state sandwich of Indiana. There will be a bill. We do have authors, and it will be the breaded tenderloin. So I will not let that get away from us. So with that, happy to, Aaron, if you want to tee up, I'm sure we have some questions, as I've droned on long enough for them to form up the question.
When called upon, for those in the room, please step up to the mic. We will begin with Brandon Smith from Indiana Public Broadcasting.
Afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
First, and then before my follow-up, there's a big increase here in the overall budget, a lot of big ticket items when it comes to a price tag. How do you convince the folks on the third floor who are typically less than willing to spend this much money on anything? How do you convince them to do all the things you want to do?
Well, we've got 4 months, first of all. 2, it's not my first rodeo. I'm not new anymore. This is my last budget. We've got an incredible team, obviously, that's not starting tomorrow or Monday. We've been at this. I've met with leadership, I've met with members already, so this is not of surprise. Our agency heads have been working hard on all these items. We think that they're not just legitimate, we think that they're needed, which helps us not be cocky about it, but confident that we can be persuasive. And we'll let the facts speak for themselves. But one good thing is about how we come together every January is we have a lot of different perspectives that get shared. And we don't claim to be having a monopoly on every best idea out there. But these, we think, the ones that I've highlighted today, and there will be more reflected in the budget that we submit tomorrow, are all needs, not wants.
And then my follow-up is, while this is the total spend in the budget that you're proposing is a huge increase over the last budget, if you look at the inflation that's gone on the last couple of years, it's actually less than that. So it's arguably, if you account for inflation, less than the last budget spent.
Yeah.
So is state government, are schools going to continue to struggle to catch up with inflation that every Hoosier and every American is struggling with?
Well, I mean, I think Indiana has done one of the better jobs, quite frankly, in the country in addressing not just inflation, but a potential recession by our fiscal stewardship, making sure that we're living within our means. You know, might have been you, but I was asked a couple of weeks ago about Senator Holdman's idea on some tax policy, doing away with personal income taxes, which is exactly what makes this state great, is that we're never content with where we are. And we're constantly trying to think, how do we become more attractive? And how do we do the work to figure out not what's just possible, but how do we meet the needs? And I just believe that over the course of the next 4 months, this is a bold agenda that hits on topics that, again, are needed. They're not just a wish list. These things are needed, and they're going to continue to. We can demonstrate, grow the pie for an individual and for, therefore, our state, one by one. So I'm excited about it.
The next question will be from our virtual audience. Please unmute when I call upon you. Brett Stover from the Journal Gazette.
You might come back to me.
Okay, we will move on then. Emily Longnecker, WTHR.
Hi, Governor. Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett just put out a list the other day of the things he'd like to see happen in this next legislative session. One of those was more funding from the state for infrastructure for Indianapolis's roads. A lot of folks would argue to have a successful community and attract businesses in, you got to have good roads. Where do you stand on changing that funding formula possibly to accommodate that, to give cities more money to help with roads?
Well, I mean, first of all, we took a giant step forward in 2017 to establish and worked with locals, again, hand in glove, actually, and they had a pronounced effect on where we ended up in 2017 to meet local needs. But happy to sit down with the mayor of Indianapolis or any other city or town in how we address infrastructure needs. One thing I can say is we've come a long way in terms of maintaining and building our state infrastructure, and that rests on kind of that final mile into the factory floor bay, if you will, in every local community. And so, of course, it's a budget session, and it will be nothing different, whether it's the mayor of Indianapolis or New Haven.
We'll try virtual again. Abdul, if you could unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon, Governor. Happy New Year to you and your staff. Quick question. Obviously, you got an extensive agenda, a bold agenda. How do you stop it from being derailed, sidetracked by those issues that tend to pop up during the session, whether it's cultural issues, social values, CRT, abortion? How do you keep your fellow Republicans focused on the big picture?
Well, first of all, I mean, you ask that question every 2 years or every year. I let our agenda speak for itself. We'll be focused on this agenda. Of course, I understand others have other passions. They ran on them, which is being transparent. And we're elected. And so, of course, I'm not a blockhead about this, where I think that just no one has their own opinion about why they're there and why they are serving. And we'll continue to focus on our agenda, and we'll weigh in when appropriate on issues. I haven't seen any of these bills that you're referring to, so I certainly won't get involved on hypotheticals right now, but we'll cross those bridges when we need to. Any minute that I'm spending on a hypothetical that may or may not happen is a minute I'm not spending on what we just went over. And that's why I turn my cards face up with citizens and the legislature and 6.8 million Hoosiers who are willing to listen. And that's the practice that we'll continue with.
The next question is from Peter Blanchard, IBJ.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
Could you explain the $300 million annual increase you want to put into the tax credit cap for the IEDC?
Yeah, oftentimes we're looking to secure not just one, but maybe many different deals. And obviously our tax policy and capping those and having the flexibility to do those for a 1 or a 2 or a 3 deal package is important. And so having having that flexibility to attribute those caps, that tax policy, is just yet another tool that we use to compete with other states that are doing the same.
That $300 million increase, what was the
A year.
original number you're increasing it from? Do you know?
Yeah, Chris, do you remember the previous?
I believe, excuse me, I believe the tax credits we're just memorializing it and putting it into statute.
So just making it permanent.
I see. And a quick follow-up, the $150 revolving loan fund for site acquisition, is that mainly intended for the LEAP district in Boone County, or are there other areas of the state you're looking at?
No, it's not mainly intended for any one. It's mainly intended for more. And again, we'll be working with partners. This isn't the state going in and taking, there's nothing eminent domain about this. This is others stepping forward that say, wait a second, we have an ideal location for such a venture. And we're looking for a partner with the state. And oftentimes the state can go in and play this role, working every step of the way with the local community. And so this, that fund, that revolving fund, will be key in realizing the benefit of that approach.
Thank you.
Next is in our virtual audience, Alexandra Appleton from Chalkbeat, Indiana.
For schools funding, I was just wondering if there has been any discussion to boost funding for English language learners as IDOE requested a few weeks ago.
You want to speak for yourself, but I'll tell you, we chose to, Alexandria, and I want you to have your say. We chose to go down the tuition support. It provides obviously the most flexibility instead of looking at individual programs. But Dr. Jenner, you want to comment on your?
Thank you for the question, Alex. So you probably know our EL student population, that trajectory continues to grow in the state of Indiana. We now have over 77,500 EL students. In order to meet that trajectory need, we have to, as a state, do an increase per the number in the equation of what's in the budget. But on top of that, we did ask for an additional increase. And that's because when we look at our assessment data, and we've done these major evaluations, we see that our English learner students are those who are really struggling to catch up after COVID. They're our student population that as a state, we are most concerned about right now. And so we've asked for an individual student monetary amount increase as well and hope to get it. Thank you.
Our next question is from Meredith Hackler, RTV6.
Good afternoon, Governor, and Happy New Year. So obviously you've been very committed to increasing teachers' pay. In this pamphlet you just sent out to the press, it says you want to increase that to $60,000 a year. In that commitment, is there a same commitment to making sure that health premiums stay the same so that roughly $5,000, $6,000 that teachers are going to be getting more a year doesn't go simply to their healthcare costs?
When I said 60,000, I mean at least 60,000. That's very dependent on the local bargaining units, but we believe with this north of $1 billion increase allows us to build on that progress that we've made over the last two budgets and get us there. Obviously, when you look at a total compensation average is at least 75,000 for every teacher in the state of Indiana, the average. Meaning if we're at 56,690, then we've got room to go to get to that 60. But I believe that we have the means to do that, and we'll certainly look to be good partners when it comes to the funding where it gets directed to. But this will require, I mentioned the superintendent before we walked out here, that I'd like to sit down sooner rather than later, because those local bargaining units that go through that compensation package, they're the ones that ultimately determine that figure. And I'm all for that. I'm all for that local determination. I don't want the state to come in and start setting those levels, but we do have within our ability to make it possible to get there. And by the way, we'll be working with, this is something that's of great concern to myself and to the legislature, on healthcare costs in general. And so that train will be moving down the track over the next 4 months as well. That won't just affect teachers, but the population at large as well.
Have you been in conversations with the Indiana State Teachers Association or any other teachers unions about their take on these situations or their take on your policies?
We've read their agenda, their 2023-2024 budget agenda, and we'll be in, as we have been in the past, conversation with them as the 4 months unfold.
Next to our virtual audience, Dave Bangard from based in Lafayette.
Governor, on higher education, what metrics do you want to see from the universities, and how are you going to measure whether their students are staying in Indiana? What's the rationale, and what are you going to measure that against?
Well, again, I mean, I'll just be general about this at the outset, and we want to make sure more of the students that are coming here that leave stay here. And we'll be working with Chris Lowry at the commissioner of CHE has some good ideas that we'll be looking to support through the formula that will reward more of those students via funding who stay here, and the schools. I think that's fair and accurate to say. So that's how we'll measure it.
Our next question is from Caitlin Lang, State Affairs.
Hello. Your budget contains some money for trauma care or EMS initiatives as part of the recommendations from the Public Health Commission. Why is trauma care an important area to invest in? And do you think more will need to be done in the future aside from what's in this budget, such as funding for creating more trauma centers, things like that?
Yeah. You want to share about the gaps that we're seeing?
It's a great question, and thank you for that. Trauma is the number one cause of death for Hoosiers ages 1 through 44, and a lot of people don't realize that. And whether you live or die and you have long-term disabilities depends a lot on who picks you up originally, who can stabilize you, whether you're able to get to a trauma center to address your particular issues, whether even time-sensitive emergencies like cardiac problems or stroke problems can be addressed at the particular hospital that you're going to. And we saw definite gaps during the pandemic with the ability to be able to pick people up by EMS and get them to higher levels of care, have interfacility transfer that needed to occur. So we clearly, during the pandemic, supplemented the EMS. We really need to support Department of Homeland Security and how we recruit and how we train, how we advance the level of education that our EMS has, and how we retain those individuals so that we go from basic life support to advanced life support. And we have the ambulances that are equipped to manage all of that. It's also really important to look at the trauma centers around the state. We just had the American College of Surgeons here doing an evaluation for our trauma system. Our last one was in 2008. I can tell you Dr. Lindsay Weaver and our team did an amazing job with them when they were here. And what we saw was that we had grown from 8 trauma centers in 2008 to 24 trauma centers now. But we have a map that shows you clearly there are a lot of areas of white space that are not within that 45-minute window that is recommended of a trauma center. So we need to improve that. We need to be collecting data and having quality improvement programs that are around the data that we find from that, making sure that we are able to fund the trauma centers to be able to not only grow, but to educate those hospitals that aren't trauma centers about how we bundle that patient up and quickly get them to the trauma center that they need to be. And then we really clearly need to be able to work on things like our 911 interoperability so that every Hoosier that suffers a major injury or trauma actually is able to be cared for by the closest and most appropriate EMS system. So there's a lot of really important things in there, a lot to unbundle, but certainly with that being the number one cause of death for Hoosiers 1 to 44, it's very important to address it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next question is Kristen Eskow, Fox 59.
Hey, Governor. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So I want to ask you about an item that I haven't seen on your agenda, but Republican legislative leaders have talked about, and that's property taxes. On Organization Day, Speaker Houston floated the possibility for property tax relief this session. I've spoken with several local officials who are concerned about potentially their biggest source of revenue taking a hit. So where do you stand on the potential for property tax cuts?
Yeah, well, I've shared the same conversation with leaders in the House and the Senate, we're watching this very closely as the tax bills will hit, or looking at the reasons why, whether it's through a referendum or why someone's property taxes are expected to go up. DLGF is taking a really hard look, and will be presenting to not just myself, but to legislators as well in the early parts of this session, as in the next couple of weeks, to better inform us so that we're not taking a step or taking action that is unwarranted. So yes, we're watching this very closely. It's too soon to come out with a property tax cut. We made, again, this is back in what, Luke, probably 2006, we did property tax reform. No, it would have been 8 or 9, that really put us on solid ground in terms of capping property taxes. The assessed side of the equation, of course, you want your property value to increase until you don't want it to increase to where it prices you out. And so we're mindful of this, and we're watching this, and we'll work with the legislature to make sure we get it right, but not at the expense of what we were able to achieve not too relatively long ago.
Are there other ways you think the legislature can help this session with housing affordability statewide?
We're looking at a number of items in terms of housing, yeah. And when the hard part about rolling out an agenda, being a thumbnail sketch of it all, is there are a lot of other items in this, but housing is certainly, like childcare, something that, affordable housing especially, making sure that there are means available. But this is one of those issues where you want to make sure you get it right, because it takes, again, partnership at the very local level too, and a willingness to build new affordable housing, not just having the funding available, or like a revolving loan fund like we do for water projects, et cetera. So there's a lot of ideas percolating or circulating out there, and I think we'll make some progress on this front too.
Our next one is Erica Heron, Indy Star.
Hi, Erica.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
You have a lot of big increases in spending in this budget, but economists are predicting a mild recession coming up here soon. Any concerns that we won't be able to sustain some of this spending into the future?
Well, we're looking at the same revenue forecasts that you are, and we're planning accordingly. And the good news about a mid-December forecast is there's one in April before we are scheduled to adjourn. When I mentioned being nimble, we've had to do this ever since I've been involved, just speaking from my own personal experience. And so we'll be mindful not to spend more than we have. This doesn't, as I mentioned, this budget that we'll submit tomorrow at 10 a.m. does not do that. In fact, it's leaving 14.4% in reserves. And that's by design. That's for a couple of reasons. One is that we know there's some other areas that we could grow. And we know that there are some issues out there that the legislature, with all due respect, are going to put forward in the next week or so as well. And there's some good ideas out there. And I wanted to leave room to be supportive of those efforts as well as they come together. And so we're not spending more. I mean, the budget that we have presented is balanced. It doesn't spend more than we take in, forecast or actual.
Our next question is from our online audience. Kathy Treader, if you could please unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kathy. How goes Santa Claus?
Santa Claus goes fine. Ferdinand goes fine. We're all pretty good in Southern Indiana right now.
There you go.
I was going back. One of my questions was asked earlier, but I wanted to ask about, let me find my note. About it's school funding, but so you want to expand eligibility for 21st Century Scholarship Program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But how do we get to that pre-K, to that group, to helping cover so that parents can frankly go back to work if they need to. I mean, is federal funding going to be part of that 25 million? That's
So I tell you what, Kathy, I'm looking at my colleagues, the chair of ELAC who's here, Maureen Weber, as well as Dr. Dan from FSSA, who really leads this effort for our state. You heard a couple of things. One is the governor announced about 25 million that will be invested specifically for on-site childcare in businesses. And when I say childcare, on-site early learning, supporting students, getting them ready for kindergarten. Additionally, I don't know if that press release has gone out yet. I'm looking at the team. Okay. We have we got a federal grant that is coming out soon.
well, good. That's why I was really curious about how that was going to be developed and how we were going to pay for it.
Way to reel it back in, Katie.
Thank you, Kathy. Our next question is from Garrett Berquist, Wish TV.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
Given the role that education is playing in this budget, should lawmakers change the complexity formula to take into account factors such as area income, that sort of thing?
It's not the track I'm going down.
And then also, you mentioned STEM curriculum. What sort of overlap does what you're looking for in that area have with some of the things that Speaker Houston Company have talked about regarding high school curriculum? What sort of discussions have you had there?
Considerable. There is. I can confirm. We're in line. We're of one mind in terms of making sure that there are quality programs in place, inventoried, and in place and funded, so that students can, again, not to be a skipping record, but have their ticket to success, which often is tethered to this new economy, the digital economy. Those STEM subjects are critically important to have in place across the state of Indiana. We just want to make sure they're quality and that they lead to something of significance.
Our next question is from Casey Smith, Indiana Capital Chronicle. All right, we will go to Tom Davies, AP.
Hello, Governor. You've addressed this some, but just how realistic with the percent increase you're proposing for our schools to meet both the inflationary increases that they've seen and also meet that 60K student teaching goal? That seems that's going to be a big lift for school districts. Is what you're proposing enough to do that? I'm looking on what they've been able to accomplish over the last two budgets and projecting forward, understanding, I mean, we deal with the inflationary factor as well in everything that we do. But 1.1+ billion is significant and will go a long way. A 6% increase in year one and 2% in year two, I think gets them down the road. I'd be happy to have further discussions with the superintendents and the principals, et cetera, every association that's concerned about this critically important issue. But we think that we're offering at least the most on record dollar increase ever before in our state's history. And that's building on a foundation that has been growing over the recent years.
Governor, that concludes the media portion.
All right. So what portion's next? Yeah. Breaded tenderloins for all? Yeah. Thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate it.